Several years ago, I worked part-time at a Dunkin Donuts near my neighborhood. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady and gave me a paycheck to cover my bills. The location I worked at wasn't especially busy, and the shifts, though occasionally dull, were manageable. I usually enjoyed the predictable rhythm of the job. Mornings were chaotic, with a steady stream of people grabbing coffee on their way to work, but evenings, especially toward closing time, were quiet. That particular evening, however, would be anything but routine. I was scheduled to work the closing shift that night. We closed at 9 p.m., and I had worked many of these shifts before. It was supposed to be an easy evening: wipe down the counters, restock the shelves, and lock up. But things were already off to an unusual start. My coworker, who was supposed to join me, hadn't shown up. No call, no message, nothing. At first I was mildly annoyed, but the frustration soon gave way to practicality. I reassured myself. "You've got this. It's a quiet evening. It won't be a problem to handle things alone." The first few hours were uneventful. A couple of regulars came in, a man in his late 50s who always ordered a large black coffee, and a family grabbing a dozen donuts for their movie night. By 7 p.m., the shop was practically empty. The rhythmic hum of the coffee machines and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights became the only sounds in the store. By 8 p.m., I hadn't seen a customer in over an hour. The shop felt eerily still. I kept myself busy cleaning the already spotless counter and reorganizing the shelves, trying to ward off the creeping sense of unease that comes with being alone in a large, empty space. The moments dragged on, the quiet pressing against my ears like a weight. At 9 p.m. sharp, I locked the front doors and flipped the open sign to closed. I began my usual closing routine, walking through the dining area with a cleaning rag to wipe down the tables and booths. As I approached one of the far booths, something caught my eye. A man was crouched on the floor, partially hidden behind the table. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. His posture was unnatural, his body hunched low like he was deliberately trying to stay out of sight. His face was shadowed, but his eyes gleamed, watching me with an unsettling intensity. My heart skipped a beat. How long had he been there? Are you all right?" I asked, my voice breaking the heavy silence. The man didn't answer immediately. He stayed frozen, his gaze locked on me. Then, slowly, he stood up. He was taller than I'd expected, average height maybe, but his frame was thin, almost gaunt. His hair was disheveled and his clothes were rumpled as though he hadn't changed in days. "I'm fine," he said finally, his voice flat and emotionless. The air between us felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. "Well, we're closed now," I said, trying to keep my tone firm but polite. "You'll have to leave." For a moment, he just stood there staring at me. Then, without a word, he took a couple of slow steps toward the door. I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe this isn't as bad as it seems. But then, without warning, he spun around and sprinted, not toward the door, but toward the counter. The sudden movement startled me, and for a moment, I froze. He vaulted over the counter with an agility that seemed impossible for someone so wiry. My heart thundered in my chest as I realized what he was doing. He was going for the cash register. Instinct took over. I wasn't about to confront him. I didn't know if he had a weapon or how dangerous he might be. Instead, I turned and bolted toward the exit. "Stop," he shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "Don't you dare leave." I didn't look back. I reached the door, my hands fumbling with the lock in my panic. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps as he came around the counter, the sound of his shoes slapping against the tile floor sending chills down my spine. Finally, I managed to unlock the door and push it open. I sprinted into the parking lot, the cold night air hitting me like a slap to the face. I thought he would stay inside, focus on the register, and then flee. But as I glanced over my shoulder, I realized I was wrong. He was chasing me. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few cars scattered across the asphalt. My own car was parked far away, near the edge of the lot. I knew I wouldn't make it there in time. My mind raced as I scanned the area for help. Across the street, a row of businesses sat in silence, their windows dark and lifeless. The only place that seemed open was a gas station at the corner. Its bright fluorescent lights spilled out onto the pavement, a stark contrast to the shadows, closing in around me. I ran toward it, my lungs burning and my legs aching. The sound of his footsteps behind me was relentless, a constant reminder that he was gaining on me. I burst through the gas station doors, startling the cashier and a lone customer who was browsing the snack aisle. "Call the police," I shouted, my voice trembling with desperation. Without waiting for a response, I darted to the back of the store and locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull out my phone. "There's a man chasing me," I told the 911 operator, my words tumbling out in a rush. "He tried to rob the Dunkin Donuts I work at, and now he's after me. Please send someone." The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but the seconds stretched into an eternity as I sat there, pressed against the cold bathroom wall, listening for any signs of the man. I could hear faint voices outside, likely the cashier and the customer talking, but no footsteps, no shouting. Had he followed me inside? Minutes later, I heard the wail of sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me. But I didn't unlock the door until I heard the knock and a firm voice identifying itself as the police. When I stepped out, the man was gone. The officers searched the area and reviewed the surveillance footage from both the Dunkin' and the gas station, but they found no trace of him. He had disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the fear that lingered in my chest long after the incident. I stayed at Dunkin' for a few more weeks, but the memory of that night haunted me. Every shadow in the corner of the store felt like him. Every time the door opened, I braced myself, half expecting him to walk through. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and left the job. To this day, I still think about that man. The way he hid in the booth, the wild desperation in his eyes as he chased me. I'll never know what drove him to act the way he did or where he disappeared to that night. But one thing is certain. I'll never forget the sound of his footsteps behind me, the feeling of being hunted, and I'll never work another closing shift again. Dunkin' was my sanctuary every morning. For as long as I could remember, stopping there had been the first step in my daily routine. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the bustling energy of customers rushing to start their day. It was all familiar, comforting even. I loved the ritual of walking into the shop, placing my order, and savoring that first sip of coffee on my way to work. Sure, making coffee at home would save time and money, but it was never the same. The convenience and the taste were worth the small indulgence. Living on the East Coast, Dunkin' shops were as common as stoplights. My commute to work took me past at least 3 of them, each one a beacon of caffeine and comfort. But there was one location in particular that I frequented. It had a spacious parking lot, quick service even during the morning rush, and an easy exit back onto the highway. It wasn't just a coffee shop, it was part of my life. That morning started like any other. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink as I pulled into the familiar lot. The parking spaces were already filling up with cars, the shop humming with the energy of people kickstarting their day. I parked in my usual spot, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. The interior of the shop was the same as always. Bright fluorescent lights, the faint buzz of conversations, and the irresistible scent of coffee and baked goods. I joined the line, placed my usual order, and stepped to the side to wait. That's when I noticed him. He was standing a few feet away from me, leaning casually against the wall. I didn't pay him much attention at first. He seemed ordinary enough, mid-30s, average build, dressed in a jacket and jeans. But when he caught my eye, he smiled. "I see you here all the time," he said, his tone friendly but a little too familiar. I was taken aback. I didn't recognize him at all. "Oh yeah," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "I come here a lot?" It was true, of course, but I hadn't realized anyone had been paying enough attention to notice me. I brushed it off, assuming he was just making small talk. He didn't stop there. "You live around here?" he asked, leaning in slightly. hesitated. Yeah, not too far. The conversation felt awkward. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't feel like chatting with a stranger. Still, he kept going, asking where I worked, what I did for a living, and even what my favorite drink was. I gave him vague answers, trying to signal that I wasn't interested in talking. Then he asked for my number. I froze for a moment, caught off guard. I'm sorry, I said, trying to sound firm but polite. I don't think so. His smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. All right, he said, shrugging. Thankfully, my coffee was ready. I grabbed it and walked out of the shop as quickly as I could, feeling a mix of discomfort and relief. I told myself it was nothing, just a guy being a little too friendly. The next morning, I walked into Dunkin again, determined not to let the previous day bother me. The shop was just as busy as always, filled with the familiar sights and sounds of the morning rush. I placed my order and stepped aside to wait. Then I saw him. He was there again, standing in almost the exact same spot as the day before. My stomach sank. Hey, he called out, walking over to me with a grin. Crazy seeing you here again. I forced a smile, trying to mask my discomfort. Yeah, what a coincidence. This time he was even more persistent. He asked if I'd reconsider giving him my number, insisting that we should hang out sometime. I politely declined, but he didn't seem to take the hint. His questions grew more personal, his tone more insistent. By the time my coffee was ready, I was practically shaking with frustration. I grabbed my cup and turned to leave, but not before looking him in the eye. I'm not coming back here, I said firmly. His expression darkened for a moment before he smiled again. Hey, I wasn't trying to bother you, he said, his voice defensive. I didn't respond. I walked out to my car, half expecting him to follow me. When I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him walking out of the shop too. My heart started to race. Don't follow me, I said sharply, turning to face him. I'm not, he replied, holding up his hands as if to prove his innocence. I got into my car and locked the doors, breathing a sigh of relief as I started the engine. But as I pulled out of the lot and onto the road, I noticed a car pull out behind me. It was him. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby or was heading in the same direction. But as I drove further, taking turns and merging onto the highway, he stayed right behind me. Panic began to set in. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with what to do. Should I pull over? Should I call the police? By the time I reached my workplace, I was nearly in tears. The property where I worked had a secure parking lot that required an ID to access. I swiped my card and drove through the gate, leaving him outside. I parked and glanced back toward the entrance. He was still there, idling in his car just beyond the gate. I stayed in my car for a moment, watching to see if he would leave. He didn't. Trying to push the fear aside, I went into the building, hoping he would get bored and drive away. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. When it was time to leave, I cautiously walked to my car, scanning the lot for any sign of him. I didn't see him. Relieved, I pulled out of the lot and onto the road. But then, just as I was merging into traffic, I saw a car pull out behind me. It was him again. My blood ran cold. Had he been waiting for me all day? Or had he somehow known when I would leave? Either way, the fact that he was following me again was terrifying. I drove aimlessly for a while, taking random turns and merging onto the highway in an attempt to lose him. He followed every move. I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel, trying to stay calm. Eventually, I managed to get a few cars between us. Traffic was heavy, and I saw an opportunity to change lanes and slip through a yellow light just as it turned red. When I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw him stuck at the light. Relief washed over me. I drove around for another 20 minutes, just to be sure I had lost him before finally heading home. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, letting the weight of what had just happened sink in. I never went back to that Dunkin. Even now, I feel uneasy whenever I pass by it. It's scary how quickly a harmless routine can turn into something dangerous. I used to work overnights at a 24-hour Dunkin'. Honestly, I never quite understood why we stayed open all night. The location wasn't exactly in a bustling part of town, and we rarely got customers after midnight. Most nights it felt like I was there more to keep the lights on than to actually serve anyone. Still, I didn't mind it. The job was easy enough. I'd clean up, restock, and occasionally help a late-night customer grab a coffee or donut. By the time I clocked out, the morning shift employees would be rolling in, ready to handle the early morning rush. It was a nice setup, one that let me avoid the chaos of the day shift. But that night changed everything. It was a typical shift. I'd come in around 10 p.m., gone through my usual routine of tidying up and making sure the place was ready for the next day, and now I was just waiting out the quiet hours. It was about 2 a.m. when the front door chimed, signaling someone had walked in. I wasn't expecting anyone. It had been dead for hours, as usual, so the sound startled me a little. I moved from the back area toward the counter to see who it was. At first, I didn't see anyone at the register. My eyes scanned the dimly lit lobby until I spotted him. A man walking slowly across the room, heading toward one of the tables. He wasn't looking at me. His head was down, his face obscured by the hood of a sweatshirt. He moved without hesitation, like he knew exactly where he wanted to sit. He chose a table in the far corner, one with its back to the counter. As soon as he sat down, he hunched forward, his hood still pulled tight, and stared at the table in front of him. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. He didn't come up to order, didn't even glance in my direction. Most people who came in this late either wanted coffee to stay awake or a quick snack, but this guy didn't seem interested in either. "Can I help you?" I called out. No response. Waited a few more seconds, then shrugged it off. Maybe he just wanted to sit for a bit. It wasn't like I was swamped with customers. I stepped back into the employee area, figuring I'd keep an eye on him while I passed the time on my phone. From where I was, I could only see part of the lobby, the register, the display case, and a sliver of the seating area. The rest was out of view. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. Everything was quiet. The man didn't make a sound or move from his spot as far as I could tell. I started to relax, assuming he was just another harmless late-night drifter. But when I stepped out from the back to check on the lobby, my heart nearly stopped. He was no longer sitting at the table. He was standing by the counter directly across from me. For a second I froze, trying to process what I was seeing. His hood was down now, revealing long, stringy hair that fell forward, obscuring most of his face. What little I could see was pale and gaunt, almost corpse-like. His head was tilted slightly, and he was staring at me through the curtain of his hair. Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaky. He didn't answer. I took a cautious step forward, trying to gauge his intentions. Was he just trying to order something? Was he on drugs? There was something deeply unsettling about the way he stood there, motionless and silent, like a predator sizing up its prey. Before I could say anything else, he moved. In one swift motion, he vaulted over the counter. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding his grasp as he lunged toward me. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. "You can't be back here." He didn't seem to care. His movements were erratic, almost animalistic as he closed, the distance between us. His long hair whipped around his face as he reached for me again, his fingers clawing at the air. I darted to the side, my adrenaline kicking into overdrive. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I knew I couldn't let him corner me. I made a split-second decision to run. Bolting for the front door, I didn't dare look back. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I burst. Outside, my legs carrying me to the only safe place I could think of, my car. I yanked the door open, jumped inside, and locked the doors. My hands were trembling as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man in the Dunkin'. He's behind the counter and he tried to grab me. I blurted out, my words tumbling over each other in my panic. The operator tried to calm me down, asking for details, but my eyes were glued to the building. The front windows glowed faintly in the dark. and I half expected to see the man burst out at any moment. He didn't. Instead, everything stayed eerily quiet. Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and my phone with the other. Finally, the sound of sirens broke the silence. 2 police cars pulled into the lot, their lights flashing. I watched as the officers entered the building, their hands on their holsters. I couldn't see much from where I was, but I didn't need. A few minutes later, they emerged, dragging the man in handcuffs. He was fighting them, thrashing and shouting incoherently. His long hair hung in his face, and his movements were wild, like a caged animal. It took both officers to subdue him and get him into the back of the squad car. One of the officers came over to speak with me, asking for my account of what happened. I told them everything, my voice still shaking. They informed me that when they found the man, he was crouched behind the counter, rummaging through drawers. When confronted, he became aggressive, trying to fight off the officers. "He's definitely on something," the officer said, shaking his head. "Meth, maybe. Could explain his behavior." Hearing that didn't make me feel any better. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't escaped chilled me to the bone. After that night, I knew I couldn't keep working the overnight shift. It took 2 weeks to convince my manager to switch me to days. But even then, the damage was done. Every time I stepped into that building, I felt a pang of anxiety, like he might somehow be waiting for me again. It wasn't long before I quit Dunkin altogether. I found a new job in a completely different field, one that didn't involve working late hours or dealing with unpredictable strangers. That night still haunts me, though. The image of him standing there with his face hidden behind that curtain of hair, the way he lunged at me without hesitation. It's burned into my memory. I've tried to move on, but sometimes late at night I'll catch myself glancing over my shoulder, just to make sure I'm alone. Dunkin Donuts are everywhere on the East Coast. It feels like you can't drive more than a few blocks without spotting one. They've become such an everyday part of life here that it's hard to imagine a morning routine without them. For me, Dunkin is more than just a coffee shop. It's a comforting ritual. I don't stop in every single day, but it's my go-to whenever I need a little boost or just want to treat myself on the way to work. The shop I usually visit is a familiar one, clean, friendly, and always bustling in the mornings. It's on the way to my office, tucked into a strip mall parking lot, surrounded by a pharmacy, a dry cleaner, and a few other small businesses. I'd been there so many times that it almost felt like an extension of my morning commute. That's what made what happened that day so unnerving. It was an ordinary weekday morning. I was running slightly behind schedule, not late, but close enough to feel a little rush in my step. I decided to stop by Dunkin for a coffee and maybe a donut. It wasn't something I did every day, but I felt like I needed it that morning. The parking lot was already filling up with cars as I pulled in. I drove past a few open spots near the entrance and chose one a little farther back, closer to the edge of the lot. It was habit more than anything. I liked having a bit of space around my car, especially on busy mornings like this. Grabbing my wallet, I locked the car and headed inside. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods hit me as soon as I opened, the door instantly lifting my mood. The place was buzzing with activity, people chatting in line, employees working quickly behind the counter, the hum of the coffee machines filling the air. I got in line and glanced at the menu out of habit, even though I already knew what I wanted. Within a couple of minutes, I had my coffee in hand and was heading back out to the parking lot. The entire stop couldn't have taken more than 5 minutes. As I stepped outside, the chill of the morning air hit me. I took a sip of my coffee, enjoying the warmth spreading through my chest as I walked back toward my car. That's when I noticed him. A man was standing next to my car. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or perhaps he'd parked nearby and was heading toward the Dunkin'. But as I got closer, it became clear that he wasn't just passing by. He was lingering, almost loitering near my passenger side door. He wasn't facing me directly, so I couldn't get a good look at his face. From what I could see, he was of average height, maybe a little taller, with a slim but sturdy build. He wore a black jacket zipped up to his chin, and his hands were in his pockets. For a moment, I hesitated. My steps slowed, and I wondered if I should turn around and head back into the store. But then I told myself I was being ridiculous. He was probably harmless. People stand around in parking lots all the time, right? Still, something about the way he stood there, so still and quiet, sent a small prickle of unease down my spine. When I was about 10 feet away from my car, I hit the unlock button on my key fob. The car's lights flashed, and I saw the man shift slightly as if startled by the sound. He didn't look at me, though, just stood there, staring off into the distance. I decided to ignore him. I wasn't in the mood for any awkward confrontations, and all I wanted was to get to work on time. Sliding into the driver's seat, I placed my coffee in the cup holder and started the engine. The low rumble of the car filled the silence around me, and for a brief moment I felt relieved. Whatever the man was doing, it didn't seem to have anything to do with me. Then the passenger side door opened. The sound was so sudden and unexpected that I froze. I turned my head, and there he was, sliding into the passenger seat of my car, his movements calm and deliberate. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with confusion. He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he turned his head toward the window, staring out at the parking lot as if I wasn't even there. "Excuse me," I said, louder this time. "You're in the wrong car." Still nothing. My heart was pounding now, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was he confused? Drunk? Mentally ill? None of it made sense. But one thing was clear. I didn't want him in my car. "You need to get out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." He remained silent, his gaze fixed on something outside. "Get out of my car," I yelled, my panic bubbling over. When he still didn't respond, I reached for my phone, fumbling with trembling hands as I unlocked it. "If you don't, leave right now, I'm calling the police." At that, he finally moved, but not in the way I expected. Instead of leaving, he turned toward me, his eyes narrowing as he reached for the ignition. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, lunging to stop him, but he was fast. His hand closed around the keys, yanking them out before I could react. "Hey!" I grabbed his arm, trying to pull the keys back, but he was strong, much stronger. Then he looked. He wrenched his arm free and swung at me, using the keys as a weapon. I ducked instinctively, feeling the air shift as the keys narrowly missed my face. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Realizing I was outmatched, I did the only thing I could think of. I opened the driver's door and scrambled out of the car. I didn't look back. I didn't even stop to grab my coffee. I just ran, my feet pounding against the pavement as I made a beeline for the Dunkin'. The familiar sound of the door chime greeted me as I burst inside, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Help!" I shouted, my voice trembling. That guy just got in my car and attacked me. The employees and customers stared at me, their expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. I quickly dialed 911, trying to explain the situation as clearly as I could through my shaky voice. As I spoke to the dispatcher, I glanced out the window and saw my car pulling out of the parking lot. The man was behind the wheel, driving off, as if it were his own. "He's stealing my car!" I yelled into the phone, feeling a fresh wave of panic wash over me. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but those minutes felt like an eternity. I stood by the counter, trembling and glancing nervously at the parking lot, half expecting the man to return. When the police finally arrived, I gave them a full report, describing the man and everything that had happened. They assured me they'd do everything they could to locate him and my car. The rest of the day was a blur. I called my workplace to explain the situation, and thankfully, they were understanding. The thought of my car speeding down the highway, driven by a complete stranger, left me feeling helpless and violated. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the police. They'd found him. Apparently, he'd been driving recklessly, weaving between lanes and ignoring traffic laws. When officers tried to pull him over, he fled, leading them on a brief chase before ditching the car and running into the woods. Thankfully, my car was recovered without any damage, but the experience left me shaken. I couldn't shake the image of him sitting silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window as if I didn't exist. I haven't been back to that Dunkin' since. Even now, every time I park my car, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see him standing there. It's a memory that lingers, a reminder that even the most ordinary mornings can take a terrifying turn. I've been working at Dunkin' for nearly a year now. It's not exactly the busiest location, nestled in a quieter area of town, but it has its rhythms. The mornings are hectic, with a steady stream of customers stopping by for their caffeine, fixes and breakfast before rushing off to work. After the morning rush ends, though, the place quiets down. We might get the occasional trickle of customers, but for the most part, the afternoons can feel like they drag on forever. This particular day started like any other. My shift began at 10 a.m., right after the morning madness had started to taper off. The team was in decent spirits. It was one of those sunny days that made even the most mundane tasks seem lighter. At first, the hours flew by. I was working alongside two other coworkers, chatting occasionally between taking orders, restocking supplies, and cleaning up the aftermath of the breakfast rush. By 1 p.m., the store had slowed down considerably. One coworker had already left for the day, and the other was preparing to clock out soon, leaving me to handle the rest of the afternoon solo. It wasn't uncommon. Afternoons were usually quiet enough that one person could manage. Still, there was always a small nagging feeling when the store emptied out, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerators and the occasional beep of the drive-through headset. I remember standing behind the counter, absently wiping down surfaces, when the door chimed, signaling a customer. Glancing up, I saw a man walk in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short, slightly messy blonde hair and a scruffy beard that matched. His face was unremarkable, save for the fact that he didn't look rushed or distracted as most customers did. There was an odd calmness to him, a purposeful air that seemed out of place for someone just grabbing a quick snack. He approached the counter and I greeted him with a polite smile. "Hi, what can I get for you today?" Without hesitation, he said, "An everything bagel with cream cheese." I winced internally. Everything bagels were one of our most popular items, and we'd sold out earlier that morning. I explained this to him, apologizing for the inconvenience and offering alternatives. Most people would have shrugged it off, maybe ordered a different type of bagel or a donut instead. But not him. "Okay," he said simply, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Then, without another word, he turned around and walked out of the store. It was a strange interaction, but not strange enough to linger in my mind. Customers could be quirky, and I figured he was just disappointed. I went back to cleaning and counting down the minutes until my co-worker's shift ended. About an hour later, the door chimed again. I looked up from the counter expecting another random customer, but froze when I saw him walk in again. The same man. At first, I thought maybe he'd come back to order something else. People do that sometimes, especially if they're indecisive. He approached the counter with the same measured stride, looked me directly in the eye and said, "An everything bagel with cream cheese." I blinked, momentarily thrown off. We still don't have any everything bagels," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly. He didn't react. His expression didn't change at all. Without acknowledging my response, he turned and walked out for the second time. Now I was starting to feel unsettled. What was his deal? Did he think we'd magically restocked in the past hour? And why was he so indifferent? Most customers would at least say something, express frustration, ask when we'd have more. Something. But not him. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself he was probably just having an off day. Still, I couldn't help but feel a prickle of anxiety every time the door chimed after that. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until my shift ended. Then, at around 2:30 p.m., the man came back for the third time. When I saw him walk through the door again, my stomach dropped. This wasn't just odd anymore. It was downright bizarre. He approached the counter just as he had the first two times, his movements deliberate and eerily calm. An everything bagel with cream cheese. he said, his voice the same monotone as before. I stared at him, my nerves starting to fray. Sir, we still don't have everything bagels, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Why do you keep coming back and asking for the same thing? He tilted his head slightly as though confused by my question. This is my first time. Here, he said. For a moment I thought he was joking, but his face was completely serious. What? No, it's not, I said. You've been here twice already. You asked for the same thing both times. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his tone calm but firm. My heart started pounding. You were literally just here. Twice, I insisted. How can you not remember that? But he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked out again, leaving me standing there with my mouth half open. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of unease. The store was mostly empty, and the silence felt heavier than usual. Every little sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor, seemed amplified. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting him to come back again, and then he did. It was just after 4 p.m. when I saw him again, but this time he didn't come inside. Instead, I noticed him standing outside, pressed up against one of the large front windows. His hands were cupped around his face, his nose almost touching the glass as he peered into the store. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just looking inside, he was staring directly at me. His eyes were wide and unblinking, his expression completely blank. For a moment, I froze, unsure of what to do. Then, gathering my courage, I waved at him, hoping to convey that I'd seen him. Maybe he'd get embarrassed and leave. But he didn't move. I stood there staring back at him, my heart hammering in my chest. The longer he stayed, the more his expression seemed to change. His blank stare began to shift into something darker, angrier. His eyes narrowed slightly and his mouth tightened into a thin line. I thought about going outside to confront him, but something in the back of my mind screamed at me not to. There was something off about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but it was enough to make me stay where I was. After what felt like an eternity, probably no more than 10 minutes, he finally stepped back from the window. I watched as he turned and walked away, disappearing around the side of the building. I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling as I tried to refocus on my work. But the rest of my shift passed in a haze of paranoia. Every sound made me jump, and every shadow outside the window sent a fresh wave of panic through me. When my shift finally ended, I practically ran to my car, constantly looking over my shoulder. I don't know where the man went, and to this day I haven't seen him again. But every time I work a late shift, I can't help but glance at the windows, half expecting to see his face staring back at me. The incident still haunts me. Who was he? Why did he keep coming back? And what would have happened if I'd gone outside? I'll probably never know, but part of me is glad I didn't find out.